What if your crown was a cage? What if your royal chambers became a prison cell? From the sweeping medieval courts of the 10th century to the tumultuous battles of the 16th century, these queens faced unimaginable odds. Number 7. The unstoppable Scot. Mary, Queen of Scots, dares a daring escape. Mary, Queen of Scots, was born into a tempest of power, prophecy, and peril in December of 1542. Just 6 days after her birth, her father, King James V, died, making her a monarch before she could even utter a word. Her childhood was spent largely in France, a gilded cage of sorts, where she was raised in the sophisticated, glittering court of King Henry II. She married the Dauphin Francis, later King Francis II of France, a union that briefly made her Queen of France, as well as Queen of Scotland. This period of her life was marked by immense privilege, but also political maneuvering, as the powerful Guise family, her mother's relatives, sought to leverage her position. Upon the death of Francis II in 1560, Mary, a young widow of 18, made the difficult decision to return to her native Scotland in 1561. This was no gentle homecoming. Scotland was a land torn by religious strife, caught between the old Catholic faith and the rising tide of Protestantism. Championed by figures like John Knox, Mary, a staunch Catholic, immediately faced opposition from powerful Protestant lords who viewed her with suspicion and outright hostility. She tried to navigate this treacherous landscape, attempting to unify her kingdom and assert her authority, but her personal life soon became intertwined with the political unrest. Her second marriage to her ambitious and unstable cousin Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, in 1565, proved disastrous. Darnley was vain, arrogant, and deeply insecure. He grew jealous of Mary's close relationships, particularly with her Italian secretary David Rizzio. In a shocking act of brutality that forever stained Mary's reign, Darnley, along with a group of conspirators, brutally murdered Rizzio in front of a pregnant Mary in her private chambers at Holyrood Palace in March of 1566. This act shattered any trust between Mary and Darnley, isolating her further. The birth of her son James in June 1566 brought a moment of hope, but the damage was irreparable. Darnley himself met a violent end in February 1567, found dead after an explosion at Kirkhoe Field, the house where he was recovering from illness. The circumstances of his death were highly suspicious, and many immediately implicated James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, a powerful Scottish nobleman who had become a close confidant and protector of Mary. Mary's decision to marry Bothwell just 3 months after Darnley's death in May 1567 plunged her reign into utter chaos. It was a move seen as deeply scandalous even by the standards of the time, fueling rumors of her complicity in Darnley's murder. The Scottish nobility, already wary of her, rose in open rebellion. They viewed Bothwell as a murderer and a usurper, and they saw Mary as either a willing accomplice or a captive manipulated by a dangerous man. In June 1567, Mary and Bothwell were confronted by the Confederate lords at Carberry Hill. Bothwell fled, and Mary, facing overwhelming force and a growing rebellion, was compelled to surrender. The lords promised her safe passage and respectful treatment, but their intentions were far more sinister. They took her not to a royal palace, but to Lochleven Castle, a formidable island fortress in the middle of a lake. Lochleven Castle was a truly isolated prison. It stood on a small island surrounded by the cold, deep waters of Lochleven in Kinross Shire. The only way to reach it was by boat, making escape incredibly difficult. The castle itself was compact with stout walls and a large defensive tower known as the Old Tower. It was owned by Sir William Douglas, a half-brother of James Stuart, Earl of Moray, Mary's half-brother, and one of her most determined adversaries. Sir William's mother, Lady Margaret Douglas, was also present and held a particular animosity towards Mary. The atmosphere was one of grim determination on the part of her captors. Mary was held under strict guard. Her few remaining loyal attendants were carefully vetted, and her every move was watched. Her health suffered both physically and emotionally during this period of intense confinement. The lords quickly exerted pressure on her to abdicate in favor of her infant son James. They presented her with documents to sign, threatening her life if she refused. Faced with no other option and fearing for her son's safety, Mary was coerced into signing her abdication on July 24, 1567, just over a month after her arrival at Lochleven. Her half-brother, the Earl of Moray, was appointed regent for the young King James VI. Despite her forced abdication, Mary still had a spark of defiance within her. She was a queen, and she was determined not to spend the rest of her days as a prisoner. Her supporters, both within Scotland and abroad, began to secretly rally. One crucial figure in her dramatic escape was George Douglas, a younger brother of Sir William Douglas, her captor. George had developed a certain sympathy for Mary, perhaps even a romantic attachment, and he became instrumental in plotting her freedom. Another key player was Willie Douglas, a young relative of the family, a page or a servant in the castle, who was small enough to handle the boats. The plan was meticulously crafted and required immense bravery and precise timing. It relied on exploiting the routines of the castle, particularly the moments when the guards might be less vigilant. The first attempt at escape, according to historical accounts, involved Mary disguising herself as a washerwoman, trying to slip past the guards with a laundry basket. However, she was recognized by her delicate hands, and the attempt failed. This setback only hardened her resolve and made her captors more watchful. The second successful attempt came on the evening of May 2, 1568. The castle's inhabitants had settled into their evening routine. During dinner, George Douglas, who was a trusted member of the household, managed to obtain the keys to the castle gates. The exact method of how he acquired the keys varies in historical accounts, but one popular version suggests he distracted Sir William Douglas, possibly by creating a diversion, while Willie Douglas snatched the keys from where they were usually kept, near the dining hall. Another version suggests the keys were simply left unguarded for a moment. Once the keys were secured, George and Willie put the plan into action. Under the cover of darkness, likely after the household had retired or when the watch was at its most lax, they made their way to Mary's chambers. Mary, who had been expecting this moment, was ready. She was perhaps disguised, possibly in a simpler dress to avoid drawing attention. The small group then moved stealthily through the castle, making their way to the main gate. The heavy locks were undone with the purloined keys. The clinking of the keys and the creaking of the gate must have been terrifyingly loud in the still night. Once the gate was open, they were still not safe. They had to get across the water. Willie Douglas, with his small stature and familiarity with the boats, had already prepared a small skiff or a similar vessel. He quickly unmoored it. Mary, George, and Willie silently boarded the boat. Every stroke of the oar, every ripple in the water, every breath taken must have felt like an immense risk. They rowed away from the island, heading towards the mainland. To ensure that their escape was not immediately discovered, Willie Douglas, in a clever and audacious move, threw the keys to the castle into the loch after they had cleared the shore. This act would delay any pursuit, as the castle staff would first have to search for the keys or find another way to open the gates. Once their absence was noted, their landing point on the mainland was likely prearranged. A small group of Mary's loyal supporters, led by Lord Seaton and others, were waiting for her. They had horses ready and waiting for their queen. The moment Mary stepped onto firm ground, she was no longer a prisoner. The relief must have been overwhelming, a surge of triumph after months of confinement. From the shores of Lochleven, Mary was whisked away on horseback. They rode hard and fast, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the formidable island prison. News of her escape spread like wildfire throughout Scotland, igniting a fresh wave of political turmoil. Mary quickly gathered her forces, and within days a substantial army of loyal supporters flocked to her banner, determined to restore her to her throne. However, the euphoria of her escape was short-lived. Just over a week later, on May 13, 1568, Mary's forces met the Regent Moray's army at the Battle of Langside, near Glasgow. Despite her determination and the bravery of her loyalists, Mary's army was decisively defeated. It was a crushing blow, ending any immediate hope of regaining her crown through force. In the aftermath of Langside, Mary faced a terrible choice. She could either remain in Scotland and risk further capture and likely execution by her enemies, or she could flee the country. Desperate, and with few options remaining, she made the fateful decision to seek refuge in England, hoping for aid from her cousin, Queen Elizabeth. The first on May 19, 1568, Mary crossed the Solway Firth into England, believing she would find sanctuary and support. Instead, Mary found herself in a different kind of captivity. Elizabeth I, wary of Mary's claim to the English throne and the threat she posed to her own Protestant kingdom, quickly made Mary a prisoner. For the next 19 years, Mary, Queen of Scots, remained in various forms of English custody, moved from one castle to another, always under strict surveillance. Her dramatic escape from Lochleven Castle, while a moment of thrilling defiance, ultimately led to a longer, more tragic confinement that would end with her execution. In 1587, her desperate dash for freedom stands as a testament to her courage and resilience. A traumatic chapter in the life of a queen who refused to be broken even when the odds were overwhelmingly against her. Number 6. The Snow Queen's Gambit. Matilda's icy escape from Oxford. The tumultuous period known as the Anarchy, stretching from 1135 to 1153, plunged England into a brutal and chaotic civil war. At its heart were two claimants to the English throne, Stephen of Blois and Empress Matilda. Matilda, the daughter of King Henry I, was a formidable figure. Having been designated her father's heir, she was raised in the sophisticated courts of Germany, where she became Holy Roman Empress through her marriage to Emperor Henry V. After his death, she returned to England, only to find her cousin Stephen seizing the throne upon her father's passing. This act of usurpation sparked a protracted and devastating conflict that tore England apart. Matilda was no stranger to power or political intrigue. She had learned the art of governance at the highest levels of the Holy Roman Empire. When she arrived in England to press her claim, she found support among a faction of powerful barons, most notably her half-brother Robert, Earl of Gloucester. Throughout the anarchy, control of towns and castles swung back and forth between the two sides. Battles were frequent, allegiances shifted constantly, and the common people suffered immensely. For a time, Matilda seemed to gain the upper hand, even entering London in 1141 and being proclaimed Lady of the English, though she was never formally crowned queen. However, her stern and unyielding demeanor alienated many, and she was forced to flee the capital. The ebb and flow of the war saw both sides experience dramatic victories and crushing defeats. By 1142, King Stephen had managed to regain significant ground. Matilda at this point had established her base of operations in Oxford, a strategically important town with a strong castle. Oxford Castle, with its formidable keep and surrounding earthworks, was considered a secure stronghold, offering a degree of safety amidst the ongoing conflict. It was here, in the winter of 1142, that Matilda found herself in one of the most perilous situations of her long and arduous struggle for the crown. King Stephen, determined to deliver a decisive blow to his rival, launched a sudden and vigorous siege of Oxford Castle. He arrived with a substantial army encircling the town and cutting off all avenues of escape and supply. The siege began in late September and dragged on through the harsh English winter. The weather turned bitterly cold and heavy snow began to fall, blanketing the landscape. Inside the castle, conditions quickly deteriorated. Supplies dwindled, food became scarce, and the defenders, already weakened by months of constant vigilance, began to suffer from hunger and the biting cold. Matilda, trapped within the castle walls, faced an agonizing decision. Her situation was desperate. Stephen's forces were too strong to defeat in open combat, and the relentless siege was taking its toll on her garrison. Surrender seemed inevitable, but that would mean political ruin, likely imprisonment, and the end of her claim to the throne. She was a queen fighting for her birthright, and giving up was not in her nature. She knew she had to escape, but the castle was surrounded, and the land outside was covered in deep snow, making travel treacherous. plan Matilda devised was audacious, desperate, and utterly reliant on the brutal winter conditions that were simultaneously her prison and her potential salvation. The details of her escape have been recounted by several contemporary chroniclers, including William of Malmesbury, who described the event with a vividness that suggests its impact on the popular imagination. The central idea was to use the deep snow and the freezing river as a means of disguise and transport. The escape was planned for a dark night, likely the evening of December 6, 1142. The snow was deep, perhaps a foot or more, covering the ground and muffling sounds which would be crucial for their stealth. The River Thames, which flowed near the castle, had frozen over, creating a solid if perilous surface. This was the key to Matilda's gambit. Matilda, along with a few loyal knights in attendance, prepared for their risky departure. To move silently and blend into the snowy landscape, Matilda and her companions purportedly donned white cloaks or sheets over their clothing. This simple disguise would make them almost invisible against the backdrop of the snow-covered ground, especially in the dim moonlight or under the cloudy, snowy sky. The white cloaks were a practical form of camouflage, allowing them to pass unnoticed by Stephen's pickets and guards. The exact point of exit from Oxford Castle varies in accounts, but it is generally understood that they did not use the main gates. Instead, they likely found a more secluded exit, perhaps a postern gate or a breach in the outer defenses that was less heavily guarded. Due to the harsh weather, once outside the immediate confines of the castle, their journey was fraught with danger. They had to navigate the frozen river and the snow-covered countryside. The most famous detail of the escape involves Matilda lowering herself from a window or a tower of the castle. While some accounts suggest she was lowered directly onto the frozen Thames, it is more plausible she descended to the ground or an outer wall and then made her way to the river. The River Thames, frozen solid by the extreme cold, provided a direct, albeit exposed, path away from the besieged castle. Walking on the ice was risky. A sudden crack could plunge them into the freezing water. Yet it was their only viable route through the heavily guarded siege lines. They trudged across the frozen river, their white cloaks concealing them in the desolate, snow-covered landscape. The silence of the winter night, broken only by the crunch of snow underfoot and the occasional howl of the wind, must have heightened their anxiety. They moved with the utmost stealth, avoiding any detection from Stephen's outposts. Cold was a constant biting companion, threatening frostbite and exposure. Their destination was Abingdon-on-Thames, a town located a few miles south of Oxford. This was a place where Matilda had supporters, and where she hoped to find refuge and reorganize her forces. The journey across the frozen landscape would have been arduous, requiring immense stamina and resolve. The small group had to be constantly vigilant, listening for any sounds of pursuit, any hint that their escape had been discovered. Against all odds, Matilda and her loyal companions succeeded. They reached Abingdon safely, having slipped through Stephen's extensive siege lines under the very nose of his army. The news of her escape must have been a humiliating shock to King Stephen, who had spent months and considerable resources trying to capture her. It was a testament to Matilda's cunning and her unwavering spirit. From Abingdon, Matilda continued her journey, eventually making her way to Wallingford Castle, another stronghold held by her loyal supporters. Her escape from Oxford was a remarkable feat of endurance and strategic planning, and it allowed her to continue her fight for the English throne. While Matilda never achieved her ultimate goal of being crowned Queen of England, her escape from Oxford played a crucial role in prolonging the anarchy, demonstrated her resilience and commitment to her cause, rallying her supporters and further frustrating Stephen's efforts to consolidate his power. The war eventually ended with the Treaty of Wallingford in 1153, which stipulated that Stephen would remain king for his lifetime, but Matilda's son, Henry Plantagenet, would succeed him. This paved the way for the powerful Plantagenet dynasty, ensuring that Matilda's royal line eventually did inherit the crown. Her icy escape from Oxford remains one of the most enduring and dramatic tales of medieval royalty. A testament to a queen's iron will in the face of impossible odds. Number 5. the Lioness of Aquitaine, Eleanor's decades-long struggle for freedom. Eleanor of Aquitaine, born around 1122, was a figure of immense power, intelligence, and influence in the medieval world. She inherited the vast and wealthy Duchy of Aquitaine at the age of 15, making her one of the most desirable and powerful women in Europe. Her first marriage was to Louis VII of France, a devout but somewhat reserved king. Their union was strained, particularly by her spirited and independent nature, which clashed with his more pious disposition. Eleanor accompanied Louis on the Second Crusade, where her presence and actions, though debated by historians, certainly added to the drama of the expedition. The marriage was eventually annulled in 1152 on grounds of consanguinity. Just 2 months after her annulment from Louis, Eleanor made a strategic and audacious move. She married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou. Henry was significantly younger than Eleanor, but he was ambitious, intelligent, and fiercely energetic. This marriage was a political earthquake. It combined Eleanor's vast Aquitaine with Henry's Angevin territories, creating a formidable empire that stretched from Scotland to the Pyrenees, far surpassing the lands directly controlled by the French king. In 1154, Henry ascended to the English throne as King Henry II, making Eleanor Queen of England. Their early years together were fruitful both politically and personally. They had 8 children, including the future kings, Richard the Lionheart and John. Eleanor played a crucial role in governing their vast empire, particularly in Aquitaine, where she held her own court and actively participated in political affairs. However, as their sons grew older and more ambitious, tensions began to rise between Eleanor and Henry. Henry was a powerful and often autocratic ruler, determined to maintain absolute control over his empire and his family. Eleanor, equally strong-willed, increasingly resented his dominance, particularly his numerous affairs and his attempts to curb the power of her sons. The breaking point came in the late 1160s and early 1170s. Eleanor largely withdrew to her own court in Poitiers in Aquitaine, fostering a vibrant cultural center, and perhaps subtly encouraging her sons' growing dissatisfaction with their father. The younger, Henry, the young king, who was crowned co-king but held no real power, Richard and Geoffrey all sought more authority and independent control over their inheritances, which their father was reluctant to grant. Eleanor, with her deep understanding of power and her connections, became a focal point for their grievance. In 1173, the simmering resentments exploded into open rebellion. The young king, Richard and Geoffrey, supported by their mother, Eleanor, launched a widespread revolt against Henry II. This was not merely a family dispute. It was a major political and military challenge to Henry's authority, backed by his arch-rival, King Louis VII of France. Eleanor actively supported her sons, and it is even suggested she encouraged them to flee to the French court to seek Louis's aid. She herself attempted to join the young king in France. It was during this period that Eleanor's dramatic period of captivity began. While trying to ride disguised as a man, perhaps to avoid detection by Henry's loyalists, or to make her way safely through contested territory, she was intercepted. Henry's forces, ever vigilant, caught her as she was attempting to reach France. The exact location of her capture is debated, but it is believed to have been somewhere in Poitou or the surrounding region as she tried to make her way north. Her capture was a huge victory for Henry II and a devastating blow to the rebellion. Henry, enraged by her betrayal and her direct involvement in the revolt, acted swiftly and decisively. He did not execute her, as was often the fate of captured traitors, but he chose a punishment that was perhaps even more agonizing for a woman of her spirit than ambition: prolonged imprisonment. From 1173 onwards, Eleanor became a royal prisoner. Her captivity was not in a single unchanging cell, but rather a long series of confinements in various castles across England, under constant surveillance. She was moved frequently from Winchester to Salisbury, then to various other royal strongholds. The purpose of this constant movement was twofold: to prevent any attempts at rescue and to keep her disoriented and isolated. She was kept under heavy guard and her correspondence was likely monitored. Her children were denied access to her, further deepening her isolation. For 16 long years, Eleanor of Aquitaine endured this royal captivity. It was a period of immense psychological strain for a woman who had once been queen of 2 kingdoms, the ruler of a vast duchy and a powerful political player. In her own right, she was cut off from her children, her court, and her lands. Henry II, in his determination to break her and prevent any further rebellions, held her as a political pawn, a living symbol of his control over the Angevin Empire. Despite her confinement, Eleanor never truly gave up. She continued to exert influence where she could, communicating in secret with her loyalists, and encouraging her sons, particularly Richard, to continue their struggle against their father. Her spirit, though caged, remained unbroken. The exact details of her escape are not about a dramatic physical breakout from a prison wall, but rather a political liberation meticulously achieved through the relentless pressure of events and the actions of her surviving son. The end of her captivity came not through her own daring physical escape, but through the death of Henry II in July 1189. For years, her son Richard, now Duke of Aquitaine and heir to the English throne, had been a thorn in his father's side, often in rebellion. Upon hearing of Henry's death, Richard, known as Richard the Lionheart, immediately assumed power. One of his first and most significant acts as a new king was to order his mother's release. Richard's decision to free Eleanor was not just an act of filial love, though affection certainly played a part. It was also a shrewd political move. Eleanor was an experienced ruler, a powerful figure with deep connections across the empire, and a beloved figure in Aquitaine. Her release and restoration to power would help stabilize the realm, particularly in the southern French territories, and consolidate Richard's authority. She represented continuity and legitimacy from many of the vassals. Richard sent his trusted chancellor, William Longchamp, to Winchester, where Eleanor was being held at the time the gates of her long prison were finally thrown open. Eleanor, at this point, approaching 70 years old, emerged from her lengthy confinement with her intellect and spirit undimmed. Her release was met with widespread celebration throughout England and her French territories. It was a dramatic return to the world stage after almost 2 decades of forced isolation. Upon her release, Eleanor did not retreat into retirement. Instead, she immediately resumed her role as a powerful queen mother and regent. She traveled extensively throughout England and France, restoring order, confirming royal appointments, and ensuring a smooth transition of power to Richard. She played a crucial role in gathering support and funds for Richard's crusade, and later, when Richard was captured on his return journey and held for ransom, Eleanor tirelessly worked to secure his release, traveling to Germany to negotiate with his captors. Her escape from captivity, therefore, was a political liberation rather than a physical one, but it was no less dramatic. It marked the end of a long and unjust confinement, allowing a formidable queen to reclaim her agency and return to the center of European politics. Eleanor of Aquitaine continued to wield immense power and influence well into her 80s, outliving all but 2 of her children, a testament to her extraordinary resilience and enduring legacy. Her life, marked by both crowns and chains, stands as a powerful narrative of a queen who, despite imprisonment, was never truly broken. Number 4. The Poisoned Plot. Joanna I of Naples, desperate flight from a royal trap. Joanna I of Naples, born in 1326, inherited a kingdom steeped in intrigue, murder, and shifting loyalties. As Queen of Naples and Countess of Provence, she was a pivotal figure in southern Italy during a turbulent century. Her early life was shaped by the machinations of her powerful grandfather, King Robert the Wise, who designated her as his successor. In an attempt to secure the succession and unite powerful branches of the Anjou family, Robert arranged Joanna's marriage to her cousin Andrew of Hungary, a member of the Hungarian branch of the Angevin dynasty. This marriage, however, was fraught with tension from the start. Andrew, supported by his Hungarian relatives, and the Pope, was ambitious and sought to assert his own claim to the Neapolitan throne, demanding to be crowned king in his own right. Joanna, at a young age, found herself at the center of a dangerous power struggle. Her Neapolitan courtiers and nobles resented Andrew's foreign influence and his crude manners, while Andrew felt disrespected and undermined by Joanna and her advisors. The atmosphere in the royal court was one of deep suspicion and simmering resentment. The climax of this tension came in September 1345, during a royal visit to Aversa, a town near Naples. In a shocking and brutal act, Andrew of Hungary was murdered. His body was found hanging from a balcony outside his bedchamber. The immediate suspicion fell upon Joanna and her closest advisors. While her direct involvement has been a subject of historical debate for centuries, the murder plunged the kingdom into chaos and brought down the wrath of Andrew's powerful brother, Louis I of Hungary, who was determined to avenge his sibling's death. Louis, a formidable warrior and a pious king, openly accused Joanna of regicide and swiftly prepared to invade Naples. The murder of Andrew escalated into a full-blown international crisis. Louis of Hungary, styling himself as Andrew's avenger, launched a massive military campaign against Naples in 1347. He marched south with a powerful army, intent on conquering Joanna's kingdom and punishing those he held responsible for his brother's death. Joanna, facing an imminent invasion and deeply unpopular in some quarters due to the scandal, had to make a swift decision for her survival and the safety of her realm. Faced with Louis's advancing forces and aware of the political instability within her own kingdom, Joanna made the difficult choice to flee. In January 1348, as Louis's army approached Naples, Joanna abandoned her capital. She sailed from Naples with her second husband, Louis of Taranto, another cousin whom she had married shortly after Andrew's death, further fueling suspicions. Seeking refuge in her hereditary lands of Provence, in southern France, this initial flight was a desperate dash to escape the immediate threat of Louis of Hungary and buy herself time to regroup. However, her troubles were far from over. Louis of Hungary successfully conquered Naples, holding trials and executing many who were suspected of involvement in Andrew's murder, including some of Joanna's most trusted allies. He imposed harsh rule, but the Black Death, which swept through Europe in 1348 to 1349, devastated his army, forcing him to withdraw from Naples. This unexpected turn of events gave Joanna a window of opportunity. Joanna used her time in Provence to consolidate her power and negotiate. She famously sold her rights to the city of Avignon to Pope Clement VI for a substantial sum of money, a move that helped her secure papal support and finance her return. The Pope, keen to maintain the balance of power in Italy, eventually acquitted Joanna of Andrew's murder in a formal hearing, further legitimizing her reign. In 1350, Joanna was able to return to Naples and regain control of her kingdom. However, her life continued to be a relentless series of political battles and personal tragedies. She endured multiple marriages, continued conflicts with the Hungarian branch of her family, and struggles to maintain authority over her constantly feuding nobles. Her reign was marked by a constant need to outmaneuver rivals and secure her position. One of the most dramatic periods of her life came towards the end of her reign. In the late 1370s, the Great Schism divided the Catholic Church, with two rival popes claiming legitimacy: Urban VI in Rome and Clement VII in Avignon. Joanna sided with Clement VII, while Urban VI, a Neapolitan himself, felt slighted and betrayed. Urban, known for his volatile temper, declared Joanna a heretic and excommunicated her. He then took the audacious step of declaring her deposed from the Neapolitan throne and installing a new claimant, Charles of Durazzo, another cousin from a rival branch of the Angevin family. Charles of Durazzo, backed by Urban VI, and with his own strong claim, invaded Naples. In 1381, Joanna, by this point in her mid-50s, found herself once again besieged in her capital. She was trapped within Castel Nuovo, the massive medieval castle on the waterfront of Naples, a place she had known since childhood. Castle, with its imposing towers and thick walls, was designed to be impregnable, but Charles's forces were determined and well supplied. The siege of Castel Nuovo was brutal. Joanna, surrounded by her remaining loyalists, faced dwindling resources and a relentless enemy. She sent desperate appeals for help to Clement VII and her adopted heir, Louis I of Anjou, who was gathering an army in France. The situation inside the castle became dire. Food and water ran short, and the defenders were exhausted. Despite her tenacity, the siege eventually became unsustainable. Charles of Durazzo's forces managed to break through the outer defenses of Castel Nuovo. In July 1381, Joanna, trapped inside, had no choice but to surrender. Charles, however, knew that merely holding her captive might not be enough. Joanna, despite her age and her recent defeat, still commanded immense loyalty and symbolized legitimate rule to many. Her adopted heir, Louis of Anjou, was still a threat. Gathering an army in France to rescue her and claim the throne, Charles's immediate concern was to prevent Joanna's escape or rescue. He moved her from Castel Nuovo to the Castel dell'Ovo, another island fortress off the Neapolitan coast, even more secure and isolated. Then, fearing Louis's impending arrival, he moved her again, sending her further inland away from any potential naval rescue. She was taken to the castle of Muro Lucano, a remote stronghold in the Basilicata region, high in the Apennine Mountains. This remote location was chosen for its impregnability and its distance from any potential rescue attempts by land or sea. At Muro Lucano, Joanna was held under extremely tight guard. Charles's objective was to keep her completely isolated, denying her any contact with her supporters or any means of communicating with the outside world. He knew that as long as Joanna lived, Louis of Anjou had a legitimate claim to pursue. The dramatic tension revolved around Louis's march south and Charles's determination to neutralize Joanna before help arrived. However, Joanna's time in captivity at Muro Lucano was tragically cut short. Charles of Durazzo, fearing that Louis of Anjou's large army would eventually reach Muro Lucano and free Joanna, decided he could not risk it. He gave the order for her death. In May 1382, just 10 months after her capture, Joanna I of Naples was murdered in her prison at Muro Lucano. The method of her death is often recounted as smothering with a pillow, a quiet end to a tumultuous life. While Joanna I faced multiple captures and desperate fights throughout her long reign, her final captivity at Muro Lucano was one from which she ultimately did not escape with her life. Her previous successful escapes were often strategic retreats or negotiated returns, highlighting her resilience and political cunning. Her flight from Naples to Provence and her ability to reclaim her kingdom after the Black Death were dramatic demonstrations of her will to survive and reign. Her final, fatal imprisonment at Muro Lucano stands as a grim testament to the high stakes of medieval power struggles where even a queen's dramatic efforts to flee could not always overcome the ultimate betrayals. Number 3. The Queen's Invasion. Isabella of France's daring flight to topple a tyrant. Isabella of France, born in 1295, was the daughter of the powerful and imposing King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair. She grew up in one of the most sophisticated and politically charged courts in Europe. In 1308, at the age of 12, she was married to Edward II of England, a union intended to forge peace between their two kingdoms. However, the marriage was destined for tragedy and conflict. Edward II was a king deeply unpopular with his barons, known for his favoritism towards male companions, particularly Piers Gaveston and later Hugh Despenser the Younger. These relationships alienated the English nobility and contributed significantly to the instability of his reign. Isabella initially attempted to play the role of a loyal queen and mediator between her husband and his disgruntled barons. She bore him 4 children, including the future Edward III, securing the royal succession. However, her efforts to influence Edward or protect him from his destructive attachments were largely futile. Her position at court became increasingly precarious, especially after the rise of Hugh Despencer the younger and his father, Hugh Despencer the elder. The Despensers, greedy and ambitious, gained an extraordinary hold over the king, monopolizing royal power and wealth. They treated Isabella with disrespect, curtailed her household, and even appropriated some of her dower lands, effectively marginalizing her from power and treating her like a subordinate. The situation grew unbearable for Isabella. Her personal dignity was affronted, and she witnessed the growing tyranny of the Despensers, who were alienating almost everyone in the kingdom. The English barons, tired of Edward's misrule and the Despensers' grasping influence, were simmering with rebellion. Isabella, a strong-willed princess of France and a proud queen, felt increasingly isolated and threatened within her own court. She realized that her safety and indeed the future of her children depended on her escaping the suffocating and dangerous grip of her husband. And his favorites, the opportunity for her escape came in 1325. Edward II, seeking to avoid doing homage to the new French king, Charles IV, Isabella's brother, for the Duchy of Aquitaine, a point of perpetual contention between England and France, decided to send Isabella to France to negotiate. This was a critical mistake on Edward's part, a misjudgment of his wife's resentment and resolve. Isabella, with her son Edward, the future Edward III, in tow, eagerly seized this chance. This departure was not a physical break from a prison cell, but a dramatic and deliberate flight from a political prison, a court where she was powerless and endangered. Once in France, Isabella made it clear she had no intention of returning to England, while the Despensers held power. She refused to negotiate on Edward's behalf until his favorites were removed. King Charles IV, initially supportive of his sister, eventually pressured her to return, not wishing to openly defy the diplomatic norms of the time. However, Isabella found a new and powerful ally in Roger Mortimer, a prominent English baron who had been imprisoned by Edward II and the Despensers but had famously escaped the Tower of London in 1323 and fled to France. Mortimer, a maniac and ruthless leader, became Isabella's close confidant, and some historians suggest her lover. Together, they formed a formidable alliance, united by their shared hatred of Edward II and the Despensers. Isabella, acting with a shrewd political mind and an iron will, began to gather support and resources for an invasion of England. This was the ultimate act of defiance. A queen escaping the tyranny of her husband to raise an army and overthrow him, to finance her enterprise and secure further allies. Isabella arranged the marriage of her son, Prince Edward, to Philippa of Hainaut, the daughter of William I, Count of Hainaut. This alliance provided Isabella with crucial funds, ships, and mercenary soldiers. She openly recruited discontented English exiles who had fled Edward's rule. The scale of her ambition was extraordinary for a medieval queen. She was not merely fleeing, she was preparing to launch a military coup. The invasion force, though relatively small in number of trained soldiers, was bolstered by the widespread discontent in England. The English nobility and common people were weary of the Despensers' corruption and Edward II's weak rule. Isabella's landing would be a signal for a general uprising. In September 1326, Isabella, Roger Mortimer, and a small but determined invasion force set sail from the port of Dordrecht in Holland. Their fleet was modest, perhaps only a few ships, but its cargo was heavy with destiny. Their target was the coast of England, a land now ripe for rebellion against its king. The journey across the English Channel was fraught with risk. not only from storms but also from potential detection by Edward's forces. Their chosen landing spot was the Orwell estuary on the coast of Suffolk in eastern England. They disembarked near Harwich on September 24, 1326. The landing itself was a dramatic moment, a symbolic return of a queen reclaiming her kingdom. To their surprise, they met almost no resistance. The local population, far from opposing them, greeted them with enthusiasm. News of Isabella's landing spread like wildfire. The immediate aftermath was a dramatic unraveling of Edward II's authority. Many of the king's key supporters, and even his own half-brothers, immediately deserted him and flocked to Isabella's banner. The tide of public opinion had already turned decisively against the Despensers, and Isabella's arrival provided the catalyst for widespread rebellion. Edward II and the Despensers, caught completely off guard, fled westward, abandoning London. Capital erupted in riots, and the Despensers' property was ransacked. Isabella and Mortimer's forces marched through the country, gathering strength as town after town declared for them. Hugh Despenser the Younger and the Earl of Arundel were eventually captured and executed in gruesome public spectacles, their brutal ends reflecting the depth of public hatred they had inspired. Edward II himself was finally captured in South Wales in November 1326. He was imprisoned and under immense pressure was forced to abdicate his throne in January 1327 in favor of his son, the young Prince Edward. Isabella and Mortimer, now de facto rulers, held the reins of power, with Isabella acting as regent for her young son, Edward III. The ultimate fate of Edward II was shrouded in mystery and brutality. While publicly he was believed to have died in Berkeley Castle in September 1327, possibly murdered on Mortimer's orders, the true circumstances remain debated. Isabella's escape from her husband's tyrannical court had not only saved her own life, but had fundamentally reshaped the political landscape of England. Isabella and Mortimer's reign, however, did not last long. As Edward III grew older, he resented his mother's powerful regency and Mortimer's dominance. In a dramatic coup of his own, in 1330, Edward III seized Mortimer and had him executed effectively, ending Isabella's political power. She was placed under house arrest, though in comfortable circumstances, and lived out her days in relative peace. Isabella of France's flight to France and her subsequent invasion of England stand as one of the most audacious and successful acts of a medieval queen. It was an escape, not from physical chains, but from a gilded cage of powerlessness and abuse, an act of sheer will that led to the overthrow of a king and the establishment of a new political order. Her daring escape and subsequent military triumph cemented her legacy as the she-wolf of France, a formidable figure who literally invaded her way to freedom and power. Number 2. The Forest Phantom, Bertha of Burgundy's stealthy dash for liberty. Bertha of Burgundy, born around 907, was a figure of significant royal lineage in the fragile and often violent landscape of 10th century Europe. She was the daughter of Burchard, the second Duke of Swabia, and was married into the ruling house of Burgundy. Her life was entwined with the complex and often shifting power dynamics of the Kingdom of Burgundy, a realm located between modern-day France, Switzerland, and Italy. Her first marriage was to Rudolph II, King of Burgundy. This union was strategically important, solidifying alliances and aims. Together, they had several children, including the future King Conrad the Peaceful. Rudolph II, while King of Burgundy, also had ambitions to expand his influence into Italy. He briefly held the Iron Crown of Lombardy, claiming the Kingdom of Italy, but faced fierce opposition from other powerful nobles, particularly Hugh of Arles, who also sought the Italian crown. This rivalry led to a period of intense conflict and political maneuvering. It was during this turbulent time that Bertha, as queen, found herself embroiled in the high-stakes game of medieval power politics. Bertha's life took a dramatic turn after the death of her first husband, Rudolph II, in 937. Her son, Conrad, was still very young, too young to rule effectively on his own. This situation created a power vacuum and a dangerous opportunity for ambitious rivals. Hugh of Arles, who had been Rudolph's long-standing adversary in Italy, saw his chance to gain control over Burgundy. He was a ruthless and cunning political operator, and he moved swiftly to assert his dominance. Hugh of Arles, now King of Italy, launched an invasion of Burgundy. His primary objective was to neutralize any threat from the young Conrad, and more importantly to gain control of Bertha, the widowed queen. Marrying a powerful queen mother was a common way for ambitious rulers to legitimize their claims and consolidate new territories in the medieval period. Bertha represented a valuable prize both for her person and for her strategic importance. In Burgundy, Hugh of Arles succeeded in capturing Bertha. The exact circumstances of her initial capture are not fully detailed in the surviving historical records, but it is clear she was taken by Hugh's forces and held under his control. Hugh's intention was to marry Bertha and thereby seize control of Burgundy. This was a direct violation of the customary feudal practice of seeking the assent of the nobility or the family of the widowed queen. Hugh, however, was a man of action and little regard for niceties when power was at stake. Bertha found herself a royal prisoner, likely held in one of Hugh's strongholds or an allied castle within Burgundy. Her captivity was not merely a matter of personal freedom. It was a critical political maneuver designed to force her into a marriage that would hand over her late husband's kingdom to his enemy. For Bertha, it was an intolerable situation. She was a queen, a mother protecting her young son's inheritance, and a woman of considerable fortitude. She was not content to be a mere pawn in Hugh's game. The details of Bertha's dramatic escape are recounted by chroniclers of the time, highlighting her courage and ingenuity. Bertha knew she had to act quickly before Hugh could force her into an unwanted marriage. Her escape relied on stealth, cunning, and likely the assistance of loyal servants or a sympathetic guard within her place of confinement. The plan revolved around exploiting a momentary lapse in vigilance or a routine weakness in the castle's security. Bertha, known for her sharp intellect, would have carefully observed the movements of her captors and the layout of her prison. One account suggests that she managed to slip away during the confusion of a hunt or a similar outdoor activity where the attention of her guards might have been diverted. Another strong possibility is that she exploited a period of darkness or a change in guard shifts. To ensure her escape would be successful, Bertha adopted a disguise. She exchanged her royal finery for the simple, unassuming clothes of a common servant or peasant. This act of shedding her queenly identity was crucial for blending into the common populace and avoiding immediate recognition. Such disguises were a common tactic for those attempting to flee powerful enemies in the medieval period, offering a degree of anonymity. Under the cover of night, or during a particularly busy period, Bertha slipped past her unsuspecting guards. Her objective was clear: to reach the safety of her son, Conrad, and his few remaining loyal supporters. Her destination was a stronghold that was still loyal to the young king, or perhaps a place where her own family, the Swabians, could offer protection. Her escape route was through the treacherous, often wild landscapes of Burgundy. The journey would have been arduous, requiring her to travel on foot through forests and over difficult terrain. She would have faced the dangers of exposure to the elements, wild animals, and the constant threat of being discovered by Hugh's patrols or opportunistic bandits. The fact that she was traveling disguised as a commoner, perhaps with only one or two trusted companions, meant she would have had to rely on her wits and resilience. Miraculously, Bertha succeeded in her daring flight. She managed to evade her pursuers and reach her destination. Her arrival would have been a moment of immense relief and strategic triumph for her and her supporters. Her escape completely foiled Hugh of Arles's plan to control Burgundy through marriage. Upon her successful escape, Bertha wasted no time. She immediately took measures to secure her son's position and protect the Kingdom of Burgundy from Hugh's machinations. Realizing that they needed a more powerful ally to counter Hugh of Arles, Bertha and her son Conrad appealed to Otto I, the powerful king of East Francia, the future Holy Roman Emperor. Otto was a formidable figure, known for his military prowess and his ambition to consolidate power across Europe. Otto I recognized the strategic importance of Burgundy and the opportunity to expand his influence. He agreed to intervene on behalf of Conrad. In 938, Otto launched a military expedition into Burgundy, forcing Hugh of Arles to abandon his aggressive designs on the kingdom. Otto then took Conrad under his protection, ensuring his education and eventual ascension to the throne. As Conrad the Peaceful, this alliance, brokered by Bertha's strategic thinking after her escape, secured Burgundy's independence from Hugh and brought it into the orbit of the rising Ottonian Empire. Bertha of Burgundy's daring escape from Hugh of Arles was a pivotal moment in her life and in the history of her kingdom. It prevented a hostile takeover and allowed her to secure the future of her son's reign. She continued to play an influential role in her son's court, serving as a wise advisor and a respected queen mother. Her legacy is one of resilience, quick thinking, and a fierce determination to protect her family and her kingdom against overwhelming odds. Her stealthy dash through the forests of Burgundy secured her liberty and shaped the destiny of the kingdom. Number 1. The Empress in the Night, Adelaide of Italy's bold climb to freedom. Adelaide of Italy, born around 931, was a woman whose life was a dramatic tapestry of power, intrigue, and relentless determination in the 10th century. She was the daughter of Rudolf, the second king of Burgundy, and Bertha of Swabia, the very queen discussed in Chapter 2. Her early life was marked by her powerful royal lineage, positioning her at the heart of European politics. Her first marriage in 947 was to Lothair, the second king of Italy. This union was politically expedient, designed to cement the alliance between the Kingdom of Burgundy and the Kingdom of Italy. However, Lothair's reign was brief and tumultuous. Italy, in the 10th century, was a land of constant feudal warfare, with various powerful nobles vying for control of the fragmented kingdom. The most prominent of these rivals was Berengar II, Margrave of Ivrea, a ruthless and ambitious nobleman who sought to dominate Italian politics. Berengar viewed Lothair as a weak king and actively worked to undermine his authority. In 950, Lothair II died under suspicious circumstances. Many contemporaries believed he had been poisoned, and the finger of suspicion pointed directly at Berengar II. Upon Lothair's death, Berengar moved swiftly and ruthlessly. He seized the Italian throne for himself, becoming King of Italy, and his son Adalbert was crowned co-king. But Berengar's power was not yet fully secure. He recognized that Adelaide, as the widowed queen, represented a powerful symbol of legitimacy and a potential rallying point for his enemies. She had a claim to the throne through her deceased husband, and her connections to the powerful Burgundian and Swabian families made her a dangerous figure. Berengar's solution was audacious and cruel. He decided he would force Adelaide to marry his son Adalbert. This forced marriage would consolidate his family's control over Italy and neutralize Adelaide's potential to rally opposition. However, Adelaide, a woman of strong character and principle, fiercely resisted this coerced union. She refused to marry the son of the man she believed had murdered her husband. Her defiance was a direct challenge to Berengar's authority and his plans for a seamless succession. Berengar II, enraged by her refusal, decided to break her spirit through imprisonment. In 951, he had Adelaide seized and imprisoned. Her first prison was the Castle of Garda, a stronghold situated on the shores of Lake Garda in northern Italy. The castle was heavily fortified, its location by the lake making it difficult to approach or escape from without detection. She was held under strict guard, isolated from her allies, and subjected to harsh conditions designed to break her will and force her compliance. But Adelaide was not a woman to be easily broken. Her resolve remained firm, and her determination to resist Berengar's tyranny only grew. She began to plot her escape. The details of her dramatic breakout are recounted by her contemporary biographer, Hrustvitha of Gandersheim, a nun who compiled a Latin biography of Adelaide. Hrustvitha's account is full of vivid details, and paints a picture of a daring and resourceful queen. Adelaide's escape began with the assistance of a loyal priest named Martin. Martin, perhaps disguised as a fisherman or a common visitor, was able to establish contact with Adelaide and secretly communicate with her. He acted as her conduit to the outside world, informing her allies of her plight and coordinating their efforts to rescue her. More importantly, Martin helped Adelaide plan the specifics of her daring breakout from Garda. The plan was audacious and relied on a combination of stealth, physical prowess, and external assistance. Castle of Garda was strong, but every fortress has its weaknesses. Adelaide and Martin identified a vulnerable point: a wall or a section of the castle where a stone could be removed, or a small, little-used exit could be exploited. The exact method of breaching the wall is often described as the removal of a loose stone, allowing her to slip through. The escape was planned for a dark night, ensuring maximum cover. Adelaide, with Martin's assistance, prepared for her desperate bid for freedom. She likely shed her queenly garments for simpler, more practical attire, perhaps a dark cloak to blend into the shadows. The physical act of squeezing through a narrow opening in the wall or lowering herself from a window would have required significant courage and physical effort. Once outside the castle walls, Adelaide was still in grave danger. She was in hostile territory, and Berengar's men would undoubtedly be searching for her. Her immediate goal was to reach a pre-arranged rendezvous point where her loyal supporters awaited her. The immediate terrain around Garda was rugged, and she would have had to navigate it stealthily. Her journey was not over. After her initial escape from Garda, Adelaide faced constant pursuit. Berengar II was furious at her defiance and immediately dispatched his soldiers to hunt her down. Adelaide, still accompanied by Martin and a small band of loyalists, was forced to flee through the surrounding countryside. They traveled through forests, hills, and remote areas, often on foot, enduring hardship and constant fear of recapture. They eventually found refuge in the castle of Canossa, a formidable mountain stronghold held by Adalbert Atto, a powerful count and a staunch ally of Adelaide's late husband. Canossa was renowned for its almost impregnable defenses, perched high on a rocky outcrop. Adalbert Atto, a man of great loyalty, welcomed Adelaide and offered her full protection. Berengar II, upon learning of Adelaide's refuge, immediately launched a siege of Canossa. He surrounded the castle with his army, determined to starve out its defenders and recapture Adelaide. The siege dragged on for months, a grim test of wills between the besiegers and the besieged. Inside Canossa, Adelaide and her defenders endured the hardships of a prolonged siege, facing dwindling supplies and the constant threat of assault. However, Adelaide had one final powerful card to play. While under siege at Canossa, she managed to send a desperate appeal for help to Otto I, the mighty king of East Francia and the future Holy Roman Emperor. Otto was a formidable figure known for his ambition and his desire to assert his dominance over the European continent. He was also a widower, and Adelaide, despite her recent travails, was a beautiful, intelligent, and well-connected queen, a prize worthy of his attention. Otto I, seeing a strategic opportunity to intervene in Italy and assert his authority, responded to Adelaide's plea. He led a large army across the Alps into Italy in 951. His arrival forced Berengar II to abandon the siege of Canossa and retreat. Otto, the powerful German king, had effectively rescued Adelaide. The dramatic climax of this story came swiftly. Adelaide, now free from captivity and protected by Otto, met her rescuer. Otto was captivated by her spirit and her beauty. They married in Pavia in 951, a union that transformed Adelaide's fortunes and dramatically reshaped the political landscape of Europe. She became Queen of Italy, and in 962, when Otto was crowned emperor, she became Holy Roman Empress, the most powerful woman in the West. Adelaide's bold escape from Garda and her subsequent resilience at Canossa paved the way for her second, even more illustrious reign. As Empress, she was a crucial advisor to Otto I and later to her son Otto II, and even her grandson Otto III. Acting as regent during his minority, she was a major political and religious figure, known for her piety and her patronage of monastic foundations. Her escape from captivity was not merely a personal triumph, but a catalyst that brought together two powerful rulers and laid the foundations for the Ottonian Empire, a dominant force in medieval Europe. Her story remains a testament to the power of a queen's unwavering courage in the face of tyranny.